Welcome back to the Healthy with Heartland podcast. I am your host, Justin Freistadt, of course, with your favorite creative directors and co-hosts, Simon and Shannon. How are we doing today?
Doing great.
Another healthy day with Heartland.
Welcome back.
Trying to stay dry.
Yeah, a little rainy out there. We have an unbelievably interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about stem cells, the future of your food, lab-grown meat, where things are headed. It's going to be wild. But before we get into all of that, let's get into the announcements.
All right. Welcome back, Heartland family. Just a couple quick announcements for you. If you are ready to reorder and restock without the hassle, we can definitely help you out with that. So you can get a box of marinated chicken absolutely free with your reorder. And we have tons of delicious flavors like lemon pepper, southern herbs, smoky barbecue. There's too many even to mention. So there's something that everyone can enjoy. Definitely make sure to schedule your reorders so you can take advantage of that in April. If you are in the Frederick area, we do have the Healthy Kids Running Series, which is going to be starting mid-May. So make sure to visit www.healthykidsrunningseries.org and sign up for that. You'll see Heartland Foods there. And with that, guys, let's get into today's episode.
All right. So, Justin, as you mentioned, there's a couple of different things we wanted to kind of highlight, of course, in protecting public health. So we have a couple of statistics here from the USDA and the FSIS, if you don't know what that is. That's the Food Safety and Inspection Service. So basically what they, just some of their highlights from FY21, which is obviously fiscal year 21. And as we're moving into 2022, we're already 4 months in. It'd be a good time to kind of review some of those highlights because they're probably taking place right now. So the first one is they actually announced a new approach to Salmonella in poultry. So I'd like to give them a huge.
Oh.
Yep.
Right. This should be interesting.
Right. So I actually have a quote here. Those are always good. A quote from Sandra Eskin. So she's the Deputy Undersecretary for Food Safety. And she basically says, as a public health agency, we can and must find a more effective way to reduce foodborne illness. We've embarked on a collaborative effort to revise how we reduce salmonella illness associated with poultry products.
Yep.
So it sounds like they're all in on that. They're all in on basically trying to find out how they can, I guess, compromise salmonella. And then before we actually get into how they're going to do that, I wanted to just first go over, basically to Shannon and find out what even is salmonella. Why should we be interested in, what they're doing?
Yeah. Over actually 1 million Americans per year are affected by salmonella. So it's a bacteria that can make you sick. It was discovered first in 1885 by a scientist named Dr. Daniel E. Salmon. So that's where it came from. Salmonella actually came from Daniel E. Salmon. He was the doctor. So it's actually classified into different serotypes. So they identify structures on the bacteria's surfaces. There's over 2,500 different kinds of serotypes. That's why it's so important, for these protocols and procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And then over 100 of them are known to actually cause some sort of, human infection.
Wow.
What do we have, like 350 million people in the U.S.? So it's like 1 in 35 are going to get salmonella per year.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't like those odds.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's pretty high. 19% of foodborne illness, or about 200,000 people per year, are attributed specifically to chicken and turkey products. So
Wow.
20%. So that's why it's super important, when you're talking about the quality of how things are being processed. This is why the USDA and the FSIS, step in, and they're making it such a priority, 2021 heading into 2022.
And if you think about it, it should have been a priority from the get, because I think the statistic from the CDC is there's over 420 deaths in the United States every year from salmonella. Now, for the most part, I always thought that like salmonella, if you were a healthy person, you probably just get diarrhea, some headaches, whatnot. So I think those 420 is probably, some sort of foodborne illness in terms of like the elderly or something like that. But it's a super interesting and something you should, be taking, super seriously, because in some cases it can be fatal.
And we can talk to you more about, the symptoms and kind of what it can cause, and even how you can, cure some of those symptoms as well.
Okay.
But I did want to just mention the statistics. So the FSIS creates a category system for the performance on salmonella testing.
Mm-hmm.
And since 2001, we were at around 12%, as you can see on the graph on the screen. And around 2014, before they've even made any of these like regulations and made it a point to, dive deeper into what they can do to improve it, we were down below 2%. So there has been a drastic positive, impact on them, with regulating these things, but they think that they can do an even better job.
And can you explain the graph for those, the people that aren't necessarily watching the podcast and maybe are listening to it?
Yeah, it basically shows that from around 2001 to around 2005, with the spike in the highest percentage being around 14%. And then around the 2006 mark, that's when they created the category system for the performance testing tests, the FSIS did. And then between 2006 and 2011, we had a dramatic decrease from, I think, 8% down to about 5.5%. And then from 2011 to 2014 was the most drastic because they established a lower, more stringent Salmonella performance standard, and that was in 2011. So it seems like about every 5 to 6 years they make some dramatic improvements or they increase the standards for performance, and that's what I think they're doing now as well.
Does it say what causes it or how to prevent it?
It just talks about how you can treat it. Yeah, it does talk about how you can treat it. Antibiotic treatment is one of the things that they recommend. It also talks about people being affected with a weaker immune system. So if you do have prior chronic illness, you can be more susceptible to it. But I think they said just like eating, drinking fluids, you could have a fever. It's really like not crazy, symptoms, but you can do those few things like staying hydrated, getting rest.
And I believe it comes from essentially poultry, or I mean, I've even seen it in even plants and stuff, but it's just a bacteria that grows. So it's like one of those things that is common upon, like that comes up. It's one of the pathogens from chicken or from one of those like livestock that then basically carries over from them to us, almost like the swine flu and things like that.
Or mad cow, same kind of thing.
And you have to think, when you zoom out common sense wise, we've been doing this for 20 years. We've been using these farms. It's never happened once, right? So if it's going to happen 1 in 35 times in the commercial supply chain, like what is different?
Yeah. You bring up a great point, because it is a lot of, especially when you get the farmer's perspective, it's like a lot of the things that are happening in the big agriculture is the feeding of these antibiotics and these things to their animals, because there's so many of them cramped together. When you use a regenerative system, you don't have to necessarily feed them any of that stuff, because none of those pathogens are really, they're not getting any of those things, right? Because they're using the land, they're using what they're supposed to be doing, like nature, right? As opposed to putting them in these, like these shacks and stuff all labeled together. And of course, you think about, animals and any kind of thing, it's just going to create more disease.
Yeah. So we talk about it all the time in the conventional farming, right? The birds have like less than 1 square feet per bird. It's like they're inside, they don't get any ventilation. Everything that's fed to them is chemically made, or, they're getting fed hormones. The first thing that they go to is to like inject them with some sort of medication if they're sick or they're ill. It's not about like nursing them back to health, or it's just a really bad environment. And that's the reason why a lot of these things in the past have occurred. And so that's why I think we find it so important to talk about the differences in how you can raise animals, and that a lot of these things can maybe be.
Well, it's the compounding effect.
Yeah.
Right. It's you raise them in a bad environment. Okay. And then they go to a processing that's a bad environment.
Yep.
And then they're kept in a fresh supply chain where bacteria can grow. So it's like a
compounding effect, like you said.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep. So if you raise them in a better environment, less bacteria, less disease.
Yeah.
Process them in a clean place, and then you vacuum seal so you can't get the aerobic bacteria growth. Do the flash freeze.
Yep.
I mean, that's just logically the only thing that I could think of would be the difference.
No, you're absolutely right. And that was kind of one of the questions as we went through all of this that I actually had, is like, is it better to actually update the infrastructures and all these things that they're doing as far as like going through these plans as we get into it? Or is it better to just go back to, how we did it in the first place? Reverse all of this huge agriculture and go back to farming the correct way, where you don't have to use half of these things.
Yeah, because the first thing I think of is, okay, they're using antibiotics because of the problem.
Exactly.
Not working. I mean, probably kills a lot, but not all of it, right? They're doing the chlorine baths and processing in the bleach and all that stuff to try and kill bacteria.
Yep.
Right? So that's not working. And it's like, bacteria and disease, antibiotic resistance, like all that, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have to do it the right way, the clean way.
Yep. And it goes it goes like right on path with, healthcare in the U.S. as well. Instead of combating, like preventing the issue, we try to just like after the issue actually happens, let's just give it antibiotics to try to like, help it, as opposed to why not start from the source, recreate everything, say, okay, hey, instead of like feeding these animals and treating them with antibiotics, that's not only going to kill them, but it's killing us too in terms of our gut bacteria. You mentioned it all the time, what those antibiotics do to our gut. And then we're going to sit here and then, expect that it's going to be different, that we're going to eat something with antibiotics and that we're not going to process those things.
Absolutely.
So it's like, should we go through and listen? I mean, obviously we have to listen to what they're doing, but should we actually like be voting for these kind of things as opposed to recreating the system?
Take it as, or to maybe you should take it as what it is, but do your own research into, like what do these things actually mean? And I think even more so, like kind of what you were getting to was that, like, why are we doing it that way? Right. It's because like we were pasturing pigs and raising pigs. And then it became easier to put 10,000 pigs in one large infrastructure. And that way the farmer didn't have to walk, here, and there. The grower's going to go from building to building to building. And now they can do 50,000 in 2 hours instead of, however many they were doing before. So it was about making it more convenient for our systems, and that ended up being subsidized, and there's so many things that kind of go down into it. But we were trying to make it easier for ourselves. Really.
But it's not a good system, for the farmer or for the public. Either one.
True.
So here we are, we're cutting corners to kind of try to feed everybody, but it's not a good system. Like the farmers that are farming these animals, they're not making a great living. And then the people that are eating these animals, they're not having a great living because of what they're eating. So it's not a good system in the first place.
It's funny. I put it on my story this morning, and go to my Instagram and vote, because I posed a question. Do we have a healthcare system or a disease profit system in this country?
Well, when you put it like that, it seems more like it's about, profits over actually having people be healthy.
Yep.
Or else
we profit off of disease in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Yep.
We don't prevent anything.
Absolutely. Yep. It's not about doing it the right way so that we don't get to that point, or making certain, precautions or doing certain things to make sure to minimize the effects of those things happening,
Right.
to you.
It's incredible seeing how things just kind of work out. The consequence of trying to do things cheaper, faster, global supply chain. Right now, it's getting exposed so bad.
Yeah.
The inflation, just having to transport things all over the place, the cost to do that. Fertilizer shortages for inputs where you didn't even need it to begin with. If you were just doing regenerative agriculture, you didn't even need fertilizer.
Exactly.
Now we got a shortage of fertilizer. Next couple of months here, we're going to see a big shortage of vegetables, all kinds of stuff. And it's just going to cost more. So the whole thing of trying to make it cheaper is backfiring big time right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is the blessing and a curse.
Blessing for us.
Right? Blessing for us because you're doing everything the right way.
Right.
It's a curse for everybody else because if you're not doing it the right way, you're going to find out. And hopefully the people that are actually going through it, that are shopping in these commercial supply chains, are actually going to get an idea and be like, maybe I don't, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I should go back to the farmer. Maybe I should find a service that is going to feed me this cleaner, safer, healthier food.
That's why I think it is a good
That's the
thing
question.
that, this stuff is being exposed, because then people who wouldn't have otherwise, been aware are now finding out about the importance of the supply chain, or knowing where your food is coming from, or how the animal is being raised. There's so many aspects. We talk about the layers between humane care and treatment. We talk about the feed, what they're feeding them. We talk about the genetics of the animal, and then we talk about the importance of processing and packaging it, which I think, we're kind of getting to the importance of the processing now, where things like infections, disease can be spread because of it being done, the incorrect way. Right. And Justin, you had asked, how do people get infected? Eating contaminated food or drinking contaminated water, touching infected animals, the feces, or the environment in which they live. So it could be a combination of the things. And what it is it's a bacteria that comes to live in the intestines, and it lives in the intestines of the animals, and then that's transferred to the intestines of the human.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So, there's that approach. So they announced the new approach to salmonella in poultry. How are they doing that? They basically have commenced conversations with stakeholders to kind of figure out what an entire system-based approach would even look like. So I imagine, they're having a round table and they're starting to, have these conversations. People, what is this going to look like as far as creating an actual, solution to salmonella? Yeah. The next thing they're doing, get this, they're using science.
Can't wait to hear this.
Right.
They're using science. So they actually, the FSIS has actually charged the NAC-MCF, or the National Advisory Committee for Microbiological Criteria in Foods. Try saying that 5 times fast.
Oh my gosh.
They've basically charged them to advise them on the latest science and technology out there to improve the approach to salmonella control. So,
wow.
Shout out to them for using science.
Mouthful there.
Right? So
now, what is the science?
that's That's the question, right? So we hope that the NACMCF, you know what I mean, is going to use the proper science and the proper technology, because right now we know like anybody can use science in any which way to make sure, you know what I mean? So we hope that they're going to use the science in the right way to be able to kind of approach this control basis, you know what I mean, in the right way. Mm-hmm. Then the next thing they're doing, and the last thing that they're actually doing to approach this, is they're actually contacting poultry processing and slaughter facilities to basically invite them to become a part of like pilot projects. So they want to get to know.
Yeah. I liked this part.
Yeah, so they're actually inviting them to basically become pilot projects so they can evaluate different control strategies for salmonella contamination. Mm-hmm. So they're going to the stakeholders, I guess the people in charge. Then they're going to the science-based community to find out, hey, where can we actually start with science, which is a huge thing because bacteria, I mean, you want to have scientists there to advise you. Yeah. And then the last thing they're doing is they're going to these poultry processing facilities to find out, okay, so from the science, what we're finding out, maybe is when it comes from the actual farm or wherever they're growing it to these processing facilities, what is taking place? What kind of transactions can we actually do to mitigate the spread of salmonella?
Yeah. Or could it be, people who are getting, good results versus bad results, is where is it coming from? How are they transporting it? The tools that they're using, what are the mistakes or maybe the places where things are falling through the cracks that they can improve?
Right.
Yeah. And what I thought was great is that they're going to involve, the people whose businesses it is to process. And I think too, maybe you'll get a little bit into it, is that they were offering like town halls and meetings and like trainings and like trying to actually provide something that was tangible support for these people who, they want to do things the right way. And, of course, you can't be 100%, but to improve those things, I thought it was great that they were adding that support.
Yeah. Well, that's the segue into the second thing that they're doing. So they first announced this, a new approach to salmonella in poultry. Then the second thing they did is exactly what you're saying, and Justin kind of brought it up as well, is they're supporting small and very small establishments. So they're realizing how critical, these small businesses actually are to the nation's food supply chain, especially through COVID. And we saw these commercial supply chains, all the crazy things that can actually happen when you're waiting for products that are coming from outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
So they're noticing, hey, these smaller farmers, these smaller services, let's provide them a little bit of relief. And the way that they actually did provide them a little bit of relief, they alleviated some of the financial burden by implementing some programs that basically say that mandatory inspections, the cost will be borne by the U.S. So now it's no longer on the smaller business to pay these fees for these inspections that the USDA and the FSIS basically are regulating. They're requiring you to do this, and you used to have to pay for it. Now they're saying, okay, you're a smaller business. We're going to try to alleviate some of that pain that you guys are having to deal with in terms of having to put forward the money when right now maybe, because of the supply chain issues,
it's a little bit tighter.
It's a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So they're trying to give them a little bit of
maybe they could start doing organic certifying for free and actually do it themselves instead of, letting for-profit contractors just buy the label and slap it on all our food and import it from all over the world. Oh, yeah. How about that?
Oh, I like it.
That's a great idea.
I think we're going to talk a little bit too about labeling as well.
Yep. And then they also implemented a bunch of new acts, but specifically the ARP is one I wanted to mention, or the American Rescue Plan Act, where the ARP actually provided the FSIS $100 million over 10 years to subsidize these fees for small and very small producers of meat, poultry, and egg products. So they're giving them basically $100 million over 10 years to be able to supplement those fees. So we think, the government's going to pay for it. No, the ARP Act basically came out and was like, hey, we're going to give you basically those fees that you were going to charge these smaller establishments. We're going to give it to you so that you can basically take care of that, which is helping them. It's helping the FSIS. It's helping everybody. So that's a good thing. And then the holiday inspection fees. This was one thing that I kind of was like, oh, man. So overtime and holiday inspection fees, right? So there's inspection fees for these farmers and these facilities, right, for these small establishments. And they're charging them these inspection fees on the holidays. So actually for the smaller businesses, the holiday inspection fee was reduced by 30%. And then for very small businesses, even 75%. So thanks for that.
Sounds like a lot of the stuff they're doing though is financial, it's monetary.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that was what that was in terms of trying to help small businesses. They also created and they tried to do fairer markets. So a little bit of infrastructure for them. So farmers markets and things like that they tried to create fairer markets for these smaller businesses and very small businesses. And then at the same time, like you mentioned, the FSIS is actually holding town hall meetings in some of these counties where they're actually giving the smaller businesses, essentially some support and information. They can ask questions, and they can basically find out from leadership, what the answer to those questions are moving forward. So
I think that's great.
Yep. Now this next one, this is where it gets controversial.
Oh no.
Labeling.
Okay.
And we know how we feel about labeling on this podcast.
Absolutely.
But Justin, you would be glad to know that the FSIS is actually stating that they know consumers depend upon accurate, transparent labels to obtain information about food.
Well, it
So
doesn't
they know
seem
this.
like they were aware of it.
Right. Right.
Because so many things are mislabeled and
Right.
so many terms are used in marketing that it would seem like they were not aware.
But
Well,
they are.
if it's in writing, it must be true.
Right.
Right. But they have stated that they are aware of this. So they've initiated, get this, a top to bottom review of not only
I love it.
the product of the USA label. So they're going to start to review the product of the USA label because, and then Secretary Vilsack, actually, he's gone on record to say that the department is committed to ensuring the product of the USA label for meat products reflects what a plain understanding of those terms means to U.S. consumers.
Yeah, okay. You already lost that lawsuit.
Okay, so the ordinary consumer, to the ordinary consumer, product of the USA, beef, means that beef was born, raised, and slaughtered in the U.S. Right now, that's not true.
But that's not what it means.
Straight.
Exactly. We actually have conditioned the ordinary American consumer to believe that oranges are grown in Florida, almonds are grown in California, and that Idaho potatoes are actually unearthed in the Idaho soil, when none of this is actually true.
It's just where it was packaged.
That's right.
So when I heard that, I was excited because if they were to actually make a change where that is required, and again, this conversation started in 2016 and it's now 2022.
Yeah.
So it still hasn't been, changed, but I was glad to hear it was on the radar because that's one thing that, we talk about all the time. And that's, I think, ludicrous that you could get a product that says,
hey, let us know in the comments what your opinion is on labeling and those kind of things, and them just starting the conversation. Because, it's good, and I got excited, too, when I first read that. But then, like, Justin, as you stated, it's like, okay, they're starting the conversation, and when you read the actual language that they're using, they said the product of the USA label for meat products. So they're still saying that other than meat products, it can still come from wherever?
But it's just not up to them. The World Trade Organization already won that battle. So you can talk about all you want. They want to import products. They want to move global supply chains. That's what you're up against.
Yep.
So
that's the one part of labeling. The other part of labeling, this one is super interesting, and one I would really want to know about is this. The FSIS has begun the process of rulemaking for labeling products made of or containing cultured cells from animals.
right, genetically made meat.
Let us know in the comments how many of you would want to know if your food that you were eating was actually cultured cells from animals.
was it made in a lab?
Yep.
Right. So now we're not only worried about organic versus non-organic and GMO versus non-GMO, but also
Culture.
what did it have a real life?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And for me, I don't know.
I don't know.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I don't know enough of the actual science behind stem cells and building your food from that.
Right.
But for me, it doesn't seem like a natural way. And so to stick with the most natural way, I just want to have real food from real farms. I don't understand why that's so hard.
Well, theoretically, I think I'd rather have, I don't know yet, but I think I'd rather have clean lab-grown meat than conventional agriculture meat. Like, I know what's in that, and I'm not eating it. So I'd give it a chance and just see.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the, tower gardens and these big facilities popping up with, raising vegetables in a greenhouse,
I just think
hydroponics. All that.
how long until, the government or some scientist or somebody is literally making all your food in a lab then? If you start to let them just create the meat, it starts with the meat, then it comes to, like vegetable. And I'm not saying like the growing process of it. I really mean like taking the cells in a lab and then creating food and then selling that to the consumers. I definitely want to know that is being done. That's how my food is being made.
That's the bigger picture for me is who's controlling your food supply.
Right.
And it's like when someone else has control of that process, you just don't know what's happening. That's why I'm always going to go to the local farm to where I can, meet a farmer, know what's actually happening. I just would trust that, even if they could provide statistics that it's a little healthier because we genetically do this with the stem cells and we grow it in a lab, but like somebody's in control, and that takes a lot of funding.
Yeah.
There's a big initiative. It's probably a giant company. There's probably a big lobby behind it.
Yep.
And whenever you get that kind of mix going on, there's corporate greed. There's not my health as a priority. So I think I'll be staying away from it.
All right.
Yeah. And then, I mean, to kind of tie back to the conversation we were just having, like, will it be even labeled properly for you to know? Like, that's the other thing. Like, will you even know? Because then that's where you're getting into, like,
that's scary.
When they have control. Yeah, when a large company has control over it, again, like, there's certain loopholes. There's things that the public's not aware about. There's certain things that they can put and not put where legally it's fine for them to do that.
There's just so much development money that's going to be behind that. And then those people, whatever their original intentions were, they answer to the investors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be committed. Like,
well, I mean, committed, it's like you said, you're answering to the investors. They're saying, hey, this is what's happening. Like, as a company, that's what has to happen.
right.
It's not like you get a choice.
It's tough.
I mean, you hope
It's a
there's
tough
a
one.
choice.
Yeah. It's tough, and in the same sense, it's already kind of like what's happening, right? With like the chicken farmers who are actually like growers who get the product from the companies. They have it for 48 days or whatever, the 5-6 weeks, and then the company comes back and picks it up. Like, they don't actually own like the property. Like, they took out a loan to get like and build the infrastructure, so they don't really own that. The bank owns it, and then they don't really own the animals and things that they're growing, right? Like the company like
right.
whoever, Purdue, whoever the heck it is dropping them off and picking them back up, and they're responsible. And again, they're at the mercy of how well the other farmer grew their birds that week, because they're going to get paid less if they did better with less feed. And it's just like a competition and a war. I don't know. It's really sad when you kind of break that down, and it sounds similar to what we're talking about right now.
Well, also, I think that like even our customers, right? Could you imagine feeding your kids? You know, like, I mean, again, we probably are speaking on it, prematurely, because we don't know the science behind it. Maybe but still, for me, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, it's what Justin said. Like, you think about being knowledgeable about conventional agriculture and how the regular industrialized meat is farmed. Like, it's horrible. Like, don't watch it because you won't be able to eat the food. Like, so at that point, you're already like, it's the same thing, really.
Yeah, if you would say, okay, I'm not feeding my kids lab grown meat. Well, I mean, what's the conventional food? It's lab grown outside.
Yeah,
it's not real.
Yeah.
I mean, so what's really the difference at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sad that it's like almost like we're between two. Which one's the lesser evil? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we're not.
Well, I know, but I mean, I'm saying society as a whole, their options, right? Unless they do have, farms, or they grow their own food, or they have a resource like, Heartland Foods that can provide this to them. Like, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, you're going to be at the mercy of these programs and the things that are being put together to feed the world or make it more green or whatever. There's so many different endeavors and initiatives, and not that the basis of all those things aren't positive. They are. But what actually like comes from it, like how we actually make money, like, it's by cutting corners, it's by doing all those things. And that's what business and in the industry like really is.
It would just be interesting to see on the surface. The first thing my mind goes with this lab grown stuff or greenhouse, whatever, is that I think it's a good thing as an alternative to the conventional, if for no other reason that even if they're using all the crap still, at least it's in a controlled environment, and the glyphosate is not getting into our rain cycle. It's not getting into the aquifers. It would probably lower the toxic load that people are under, So, yeah, it's not just what you're eating. I mean, just people are getting really sick. I mean, 50% of Americans are going to get cancer now. It's 1 in 2, 1 in 2. And most of that, it's from what you're eating, but you're showering in a chemical gas chamber because all that conventional agriculture is getting in the rain cycle. It's in our lungs. It's in the water. And it's like, maybe if we start growing it all in labs and greenhouses, we don't have that problem. So,
eliminate one of the things that's,
from an environmental impact, it's like, I'm okay with it.
I just hope that they're not using this, lab-based, products and lab-based meat as like the quote unquote solution to farming, right? Because there's still hope. You can still
feeding the
do it.
people
You can
with
still
doing it
get
the right
farmers to grow stuff the right way. And I hope that they're not just like, oh, let's give up on the farmers. Let's go more to scientists. Let's invest in science and scientists, as opposed to going to the land to get your food like it's been done since the beginning of time.
Yeah. I mean, we talked to Matt Mayer. If you read into regenerative agriculture at all, it's been said and proven based on like statistics and maths about like how we could feed, the world by doing it the right way, and how it actually takes less land because the processes of raising multiple species on and doing these different permaculture practices will actually make it so that you can make smaller amount of land more productive and more profitable, that it's 100% possible to do things the right way, make a profit, maybe not a crazy one, and feed people good food and have people be healthier. It's like, why wouldn't we be all trying to get towards that?
Yep. So true. It's such a myth that we can't do it that way. I mean, the amount of land sitting idle under CRP is just,
it's there.
It has a shelf life. It desertifies. Conventional agriculture is actually ruining more land. Yep. So it's just, the argument doesn't stand up.
The soil needs like the animals and the species
Look at the difference
to live in all of the stuff that's in there. So when farmland goes 4, 5, 6 years without any, the farm closed down, whatever they had to sell, and then nothing is on that land, all that, the microbes, all the healthiness in like the soil, all that stuff starts to, degenerate.
Oh, it'll take 50 years.
Yeah. Take
on
50
its
years
own.
to do that. But you think about it, they're tilling the land anyway. So they're already killing the soil. They're already doing all of that in the first place, growing just one crop on there. They're not regenerating the land like a regenerative farm is.
Just taking from it year after year, little bit by little
If you
bit.
look at the differences in terms of the actual pastures of a regenerative farm and these farms that are just literally crops, I mean, they're even, in your own state, in your backyard, you can see these, like on the way to Ocean City, you see them all the time, like these
cornfields
and
there's
just
chicken process. There's chicken
right
being raised.
And off
Not the
season,
right way.
the soil and all the microbes in the actual soil, they're like brown, they're dead. It's not even living. So it's like a fake piece of land. Whereas you look at these regenerative farms, they have this lush green grass, and there's multiple different species, multiple different.
The land still has cycles. It's not like the land, during the winter or whatever, isn't ever brown, but it has a regenerative cycle. It has perennials. It has things that are coming back year after year. It has different like species in the soil, and the reason why they have like the different animals is because the manure, the saliva, all those different things count on the land to regenerate the soil. And so the goal is that over the first like couple of years, that by year 2, 3, 4 of doing regenerative agriculture, that it's coming back stronger, thicker, taller, all those things, more species, healthier species, things like that. So
mind you, if you're a green person, it's sequestering the carbon
as well. Yeah.
So it's regenerating the earth, it's sequestering the carbon. You're doing a huge job for, the land, the earth in general.
Yeah. And even if it wasn't, just stopping the till
100%
on its own, at least we'll stop releasing it.
Right.
But the earth is greener than ever. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, it's the greenest it's ever been. Why? Heightened levels of CO2. So it's just a great environment for plants.
Wow.
So they'll live and we'll die.
Well, it's just, let them flourish, do their thing, and then just stop tilling and releasing the carbon storage that they're doing, and you'll have a very green, healthy planet.
That's right. That's right.
It's kind of simple on the surface.
It seems simple, right? The processes are simple, but it's just like the action of actually doing it, right? It takes work. It takes time.
It's just so complicated, right? It's like you burn coal. It's terrible for the atmosphere, but it actually shields a lot of the heat that comes in. So what's the net benefit there? Yeah. It's like if you stop burning coal, you actually heat the atmosphere because more sunlight's getting in.
Yep.
It's just tough.
Positives and negatives to everything. Yep. It's hard to know, what would make the biggest impact or where to start.
But when it comes to food, I think replicating nature is probably your best bet.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Mother Nature's got it pretty good.
Right. It's literally crazy when you look at like what those things are actually what's actually happening when they, and I think it's the study of like even the bison, like back in, I forget the actual time frame, but like back when bison used to roam, lands, like that was essentially the science that they're using, is that, when they were actually roaming, the bacteria, the actual areas that they were in. Oh
yeah, the plants they were eating, the weather, the different kind of water they were drinking from, it all changed because based on the month and the time of the year, they were in a different location. So they weren't staying in the same place, getting the same diseases and the same things happening. So they were never in the same place at the same time. That stuff couldn't, reproduce. And then they were able to get a diet seasonally, which is, we talk about that a lot too. But when we kind of stop doing that, there's no like movement and transition on the land. So that's what regenerative agriculture does, is it mimics that natural progression of animals, moving throughout their lifetime.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the opposite of mono-agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And we can do a whole topic on it, but it's meant for that. Like the horses are meant to manure and the chickens are meant to kill the larva in the manure.
Or you mean the cattle?
Yes, that's what I meant. Yes. But they all have
horses too, probably.
they all have a place. They all have, something that they do for each other.
That was my initial point. Is
symbiotic.
it's so crazy how it all works in terms of, like it works.
Yeah, it's symbiotic.
And we don't even know why. It just does. So like to that,
that's the other thing too. They were talking about like how you see like I don't know it specifically, like the rhino has like a bird and like the giraffe has like a bird. Like they all have like symbiotic relationships with some sort of like bird, and it's like that cattle and chicken, like that is that relationship.
Yep. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we heard it here first.
Now you know.
Yep. And so the last thing that they're doing, so we talked about, their new approach to Salmonella, supporting very small establishments, and of course labeling.
Yep.
The last thing they're doing is they're collaborating with public health partners like the CDC, the FDA, and they believe that working together with these agencies, that it'll help improve interagency coordination of federal food safety efforts and help address gaps and priorities regarding food safety data. What's y'all's opinion on that? Do you think that merging or like having these agencies work together is actually going to be a symbiotic relationship, or do you think like one or the other will be influenced? Like,
it's hard to say,
right?
I think they're all compromised. That's what I think.
Yeah. I feel like it's so hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to know, and then
we'll have to wait and see. Right?
Are the protocols even being followed? So I guess yes, we'll wait and see.
Yep.
But very interesting topic and important to be educated about. The protocols, the regulations, the things, because that is like, again, we have a benefit because we're able to get this cleaner, safer, healthier food. We know what farm the food's coming from. We know the genetics of the animal. Some people who don't have access to food like that, or they're buying, from the conventional, food market, and they have to rely that all these, corporations and things are doing things the right way.
Right.
When, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, are those big agencies
Working at
helping the general public
100%.
more than the local farmer? And so they're basically saying, oh, we want to make them bigger and more, no, I'm not on board.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard.
And it's unfortunate, you know what I mean, that it's not wrong to think that way because of the many times that they've already promised us and said stuff, about regulations and stuff in the USDA that we would feel like they've let us down.
Public trust is so eroded when it comes to all of these agencies that are supposed to protect us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people are starting to see it.
Yep. And the food specifically, it's one of those things we talk about: air, water, food. You have to eat.
So it's like the food pyramid. Like that was like sugar lobby.
That was government too.
Like eat more whole grains, less protein.
The grain and the sugar. You got it on both sides of the pyramid. It's coming from all angles. Oh, and then don't forget about the dairy and trying to promote, cheap. There's millions of different things.
Who's really running these agencies that are supposed to protect us? It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's wild.
So, super interesting stuff. We're glad to bring it to the forefront. It's a great conversation to have. I think the point of all of this anyway is go and know your farmer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't know your farmer, find a service that is giving you the information that you're actually wanting, because it really matters. And if not, you're going to fall subject to commercial supply chains. You're going to fall subject to a lot of these things that we're talking about, and you're just not going to be in the know. And what you don't know can kill you.
Yeah.
Or just keep taking your 1 in 35 chance at salmonella.
Yeah, I don't like that percentage one bit.
You want to go through all that? Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Or any kind of foodborne illness for that matter,
Listeria.
Yeah, it's
E.
huge.
coli.
Recalls. Those things are happening.
There's lots of them. I think the most recent one is food ready to eat,
meals
ready to eat.
Pre-prepared meals.
Yeah, and it's not that there's any salmonella or listeria in it. They're just the labeling is incorrect. So you could have a wheat allergy, and it's not labeled on there.
Peanut allergy.
Anything like that, and you're consuming the food.
Yeah, see?
Boom. You know what I mean? crazy things can happen. Some people are super allergic to wheat or even peanuts or something like that. You know what I mean? You can catch them at the wrong place at the wrong time, eating those things with the miscalculations of labeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it won't hurt. You'll be taking a long nap.
It's important. It's important to know, about your food supply, where it's coming from, how it's being treated, how it's being packaged, all that stuff.
And we probably went over it, but I mean, I guess, that's the question is like, in the comments or us here just talking, like, what's the perspective? How much should they actually be regulating? How much should they actually be, like doing all this? Or should it just be up to the public and, your own choice as to what farm, where you're eating? And then, you choose.
Yeah. Or, what's your thoughts? Like, do these improvements sound good to you, or do you think they're already doing a fair job? We'd love to hear, your input on how this affects, you personally and your family.
The opposite argument is get rid of all the agencies so that people have to do research for themselves instead of having blind trust. That's what allows this stuff to happen, is the blind trust in who's protecting you.
Right.
So the other argument to that is, okay, we just use tort law, and there'll be some stuff in the stores that has no label at all in the packaging, and that's basically the roll the dice product. And then companies would have to be accountable to what they put on their label. If they say no antibiotics, and then I find that it tests for antibiotics, I can come sue you.
Oh, wow.
So, and that way consumers would have to be educated and not have blind trust. The problem with blind trust is it can be taken advantage of.
Yep.
And again, the only way you would know at that point is if you were going out and knowing the person who was growing your food, aka the farmer, which, the families who we work with, they know the farms where their food's coming from.
Yeah. I'm always about free markets dictating that stuff instead of it's FDA approved, it's USDA certified, it's safe, we know it's killing you, but it's safe to whatever standard. So blind trust.
Right.
And that's as far as the discussion goes.
Yeah. It's black or white when it's really not.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a certain amount of carcinogens allowed. There's a certain amount of like animal whatever per product.
Like
there's
what if I want
real
none of
things
that
are acceptable.
Yeah. But you bring up a huge point, right? So what about when they're creating these stem cells, right? And you mention, it only has to be X amount to actually be considered real meat. And you have this cell, and you're using a bunch of other chemicals and different things. Like,
we're like, well, the cells have to be like 90% of the time on. Sometimes we might be making like a Franken animal. One cell was off, so now you're eating a T-Rex.
Yeah, 1 out of 90 could be possibly.
Imagine the type of things coming out.
What would the consequences be of like?
Well, that's what I mean.
I ate an alien.
Yeah. Half a chicken, half a T-Rex.
That's wild. I don't know about all that. Well, hopefully, we have a while before that happens.
You never know.
It's sooner.
No, but yeah,
a very interesting topic. We appreciate you for joining us. If you guys have any other questions about this topic or things that we could dive into, answer any of your questions on labeling, salmonella, things like that, we'd love to do so. And I don't know.
Before we go, I just want to mention the Mastermind.
Yes,
we had Thaddeus Gala, which was super awesome.
It was
whole lot of value. If you weren't there, you were square. No offense, seriously.
It's okay, you can
fire
come,
episode.
You could come this Monday.
It was all about how to reduce your taxes to 0.
Yeah, it's pretty legit. Got some good tips.
Oh yeah. Give us some great insight. And I know you said you've got a bunch more guests coming in.
We got speakers lined up for the next month. It's going to be fire. Monday evenings, 8 p.m. on Zoom. It's free. If you missed the meetings and you want to go back and watch the replays, it's inside Top Tier Health. Send me a DM. I'll send you a link for that. It also has a full course on data-driven nutrition, weight loss, environmental toxins, regenerative agriculture, hours and hours of content inside of Top Tier Health. But you should just show up on Monday evenings at 8 p.m. and watch it all for free.
Yep. Check it out, and we'll go ahead and post the link in the description of this post up above. If you want to go ahead and get signed up, we'll shoot you over the Zoom link for Monday at 8. And with that, guys, I think we can wrap it up.
Yeah, this week we've got Dave Shutler, longtime member of the Heartland family.
Not bad, right?
A lot of the nutritional stuff you get from me comes directly from him. So he's going to get into some scientific nutrition, different types of testing, and how to fix all kinds of problems from a health and wellness perspective. He's also competitive bodybuilder, former Secret Service. He's got a ton of mindset, nutrition, fitness, all of it. So it's going to be a great episode.
Awesome. Sweet. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps us up for today. We'll see you guys next week on Thursday. And with that, Justin, you can go ahead and send us off.
All right. Thanks for joining Heartland Family. And as always, stay healthy with Heartland.